Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very pleased to join my colleague, Senator Franken, and Senator Warren, who is also here for this conversation that was kicked off earlier this afternoon by our friend and colleague from West Virginia, Senator Manchin. West Virginia does not have a whole lot in common with Rhode Island. We're a coastal state, and Senator Manchin comes from a very landlocked, mountainous state. Our biggest mountain in Rhode Island is probably the Johnston landfill. But we have something in common, which is the extent to which opioid addiction and opioid overdoses have stricken our states. We had over 200 deaths per year going, and in a state our size, you know, everybody is within 2 or 3 degrees of separation of everybody else, and those 200 deaths reverberate through our whole state. There's a small town in Rhode Island called Burrillville up in our northwest corner. Burrillville is a very small town in Rhode Island, and I went up there for a meeting about the opioid epidemic at the Burrillville High School, and in the previous quarter, in just 3 months, that one little town had had 6 deaths from opioid overdoses. That's 6 times the little police force had to respond, 6 times the funeral parlors had to handle grieving families, 6 times that death notices had to be published in the local paper. It felt like a battering to people in that community. Senator Manchin, I think, has a pretty good idea to help make sure that we have the funding to get treatment to people before these tragedies take place. He proposes what he calls the Lifeboat Act, which is 1 penny for each milligram of active opioid in a prescription drug. 1 penny. It's only a penny, but it would have raised about $2 billion last year. And $2 billion would save a lot of people and save a lot of lives. Just to give you some idea of the scale, Purdue Pharmaceuticals generated estimated sales of more than $35 billion since 1995 for opioid medications. It has annual revenues of about $3 billion, mostly from OxyContin. That's just one company. So the idea of adding a penny really doesn't seem to me to be asking very much. I know the way we operate now in the Senate, asking corporations to do anything seems impossible because they have the financial whip hand over so many senators because of the unlimited money they're allowed to spend and threaten to spend in our politics. But really, after all the lives that have been lost, after all the lives that have been effective, you would expect that just out of common decency, this industry would step up and say, for a penny, we're in. So let's hope that they come around to that, because I think it's a good plan. Trump Care, on the other hand, would be a disaster. So many people get their opioid treatment through Medicaid, and many through the expansion of Medicaid that the Affordable Care Act created. To undo that, to strip $1.4 trillion, as President Trump has proposed, out of Medicaid is inevitably going to deny people access to care. That's not just me saying this. Somebody who works in Providence with recovering heroin addicts wrote to me. His name is Travis. He wrote to me about his clients who are receiving medication-assisted treatment. He credits them being able to come in and get the care that they get to the Affordable Care Act. It is the reason, he said, that he and his colleagues have been able to help recovering addicts enter effective treatment programs. And it works. Travis relates that repealing the Affordable Care Act would have what he calls a profound impact on his client's ability to get needed addiction and recovery services. I will turn the floor over to Senator Warren in a minute, but I want to recognize one other person. I won't use last names. His name is Mark. He wrote to me from Rumford, Rhode Island, which is a very nice part of East Providence, Rhode Island. This is a gentleman who became addicted to opiates at the age of 52. He had a surgery. After the surgical procedure, his doctor gave him opiates for the pain. The doctor was somewhat indiscriminate about continuing to prescribe those opioids, and Mark realized that he was addicted. He went to a recovery group in Rhode Island called Kodak, which does very, very good work for treatment. He went into recovery, and he succeeded for 8 years without using opioids. As sometimes happens, family stresses, business stresses, other stresses intervene, and in his case, a family stress caused a relapse. But he knew what to do. He went back to Kodak, he became sober again, and now he's back in recovery, clean and sober. This pattern of recovery and then an occasional relapse and then back to recovery again is very often the way people who have an addiction get through it. And to make sure that the treatment is there for them when they relapse can be a lifesaver. By the way, Mark is a success. He's in the music business. He has toured around the world. And the fact that Kodak was there for him on these two occasions has allowed him to achieve that success. Again, a 52-year-old individual who was surgery sent into addiction. I'll close by pointing out that one of the things that the CARA bill that many of us worked so hard on accomplished was to send the message that addiction is not a moral failing. It is a medical condition, and it should be treated as a medical condition. Not only is it not a moral failing, I think many of us who have had family, loved one, friends, or any experience with folks who are going through recovery, what we have learned is that recovery is actually a noble accomplishment. It's not an easy path, but it's a path that demands deep honesty, deep courage, deep trust, very often love, and that it's a path that people who are walking it can and should be proud of. And we should be proud of them for their achievements, and we should be there for them in their relapses and make sure that the care that will put them back onto that path is available. So with that, I will yield the floor to my terrific colleague from Massachusetts.